Mark has been in the industry for many years. He has pioneered, he's written 3 books that have pioneered some of the ways that people can improve their business. And for the last 2 to 3 years, I've been watching and being part of Mark's workshops on time mastery. Of every wealth that you have in this world, the one thing that cannot be replaced is time. And I can't tell you how often we think of technology to help us save time. But Mark has a system that he has shared with me and many others in this industry that has been very useful for us in not being overwhelmed in trying to get things more done. And I may be getting ahead of myself, but I wanted to just share one story that Mark has told us. When he started the system many years ago, people just asked him one question: how are you able to get many things done? And then he said, look, I have a system that I follow every day. I'm willing to teach you the system. And that's how he's developed the system that hopefully all of you will enjoy and carry away with you. We are also at Leap, we'd like to get more feedback on what kind of new events and presentations and authors and thought leaders like Mark that we can get. So please feel free to give us the feedback in the chat box. But for the next 45 minutes to an hour or so, our time will be best used with Mark. Thank you very much, Mark.
Great. Thank you, Sashi. And welcome, everybody. Again, as Sashi said at the beginning, 2020 has been a year that hopefully we'll never experience again, but also there's so many things that we look in the rearview mirror, and there's been a lot of certainly silver linings for the home improvement industry. And I think this time of the year is a great time to kind of reflect not only in the past, but also to reflect on what we want to do in the future. And I think this whole notion of time, as Sashi said, it's one of the few things that, number one, you never get it back once you lose it, but also we're all dealt the same amount of cards. We all get 24 hours in a day, 7 days a week, regardless whether you're smarter, regardless whether you're wealthier or you have more control, we get the same amount. And one of the things I've found in being somewhat of a student of time, over the last 30 years or so, is that there's the probably one of the key elements that the most successful people have is in fact how they are masterful or mastery of time. You'll never achieve, I think, the level of success or the level of fulfillment unless you understand time and certainly start to master it. Now, this particular segment or webinar was titled, 7 simple steps to master time. The reality is that just because something is simple, as you will see from some of my things today, doesn't make it easy. I've given this presentation or a variation of this presentation to several thousand people, and as a result of that, I have a pretty good understanding and feel for kind of the track record of how people are able to really kind of take their time game to the next level. And while I think everybody comes away with this from this presentation, I think having at least a nugget or two that makes them better for the next day. But at the end of the day, your success and failure is not going to be from one nugget or two. It's going to be embracing new systems and processes. And as a result of that, I find that the success rate is maybe 10 or 20%, that those that have the discipline to be able to, really change and adjust. And what's interesting, it's those that have the thirst for themselves or the pain for themselves that really want to master, I think, time. So if we think about 7 steps here, they also follow kind of the agenda, what I'm going to be talking about today. I'm going to spend a little time helping you understand time. Time is an interesting thing in that we all have it. We all know what it is, but it's not one of these things we can touch and feel and taste. So it's important to understand it in a little bit more indirect ways. Second is we'll understand why this is important. We'll talk and take a little bit of inventory of your time. I'll give you some exercises that you can do on your own, and you'll be able to take some inventory of your time, because, you know, kind of following this notion, if you don't know where you're heading, you know, any road will take you there. Time is very similar. If you don't know where you stand now, it's really hard to know exactly what that prescription is. I'm going to be talking about proactive versus reactive time, which is such a foundational element. Then we're going to get into a system, an actual time management system. It's no different than a sales system or a home remodeling or home improvement system, how you go about doing things. Well, how you plan your day every day is a system as well. And just like with other systems in your life, whether you think about them or not, like getting ready to go to work or, you know, preparing in a sports game, those kind of things, they all involve processes and systems. And I'm going to give you a simple system that will literally, I think, change and give you huge dividends of time if you can embrace it. And then we'll talk about, you know, how you go about avoiding mistakes, because, you know, I think if you can not step in the potholes, you will certainly be more successful. And then the last of the 7 steps is in monitoring. You know, monitor, monitor, monitor. It's sort of similar like if you're flying an airplane. You know, that pilot monitors the process. If he's not monitoring the process, checking the weather, checking the air traffic, checking kind of the distances and the airspeeds, all those kind of things, you'll never get to that location that ultimately you want to. When it comes to your day, I think it's very similar to that. So let's start with you, and that is all people are not time mastery equal. And I don't mean this in any sort of disparaging way, but there's a group of you on this particular webinar that are in a really kind of rebuilding mode. Quite frankly, you might be a hot mess, out of control when it comes to time or time mastery. Matter of fact, someone may have seen this webinar pop up and say, you know, I know exactly the person that needs to be on this, and you're rethinking your time. You know, I encourage you to really start small. You need to be back at the basics, if in fact. Don't try to, you know, get out a sharp saw, so to speak, and work on the fine tuning until we have the basics. There's another group of you that are doing okay, but you're just feeling a little bit stressed, especially given the times we're in. You're also needing to focus on a few specific weak links and maybe add a couple techniques. Then there's another group of you that are kind of time mastery junkies, and I certainly have a following of those, having written a book and done this webinar with many folks, is that they're always looking for new ways or better ways of doing it. How do I gain an extra 30 minutes, an extra hour a week? Then how do I see that dividend of time multiplying out over the course of a year and literally adding up the 300, 400, 500 hours in a year if I can just get better at mastering time? You know, accomplishing big goals are in many ways more of a product of time. I mean, how many times have you said to yourself, gosh, I'd love to do something if I had time? Well, if you get a dividend of time, you can accomplish those bigger goals, and you can just take your overall life and your game certainly to the next level. So the first question I think everybody needs to ask themselves is why? Why is being in control of your day? Why is mastering time important? And I'm going to give you a few things. If I'm doing this in a more one-on-one or interactive kind of coaching way, these are questions, quite frankly, you need to ask yourself. So I would, at least on your piece of paper, as you're taking notes on things, why is this important? And I share this not because the answers I'm about to give you are so obvious. I share this is because I'm a true believer in life. If you have a strong why, you will be more likely to get out of bed in the morning and jump onto that treadmill and get working on something. If you don't have a strong why, it's so easy to hit the snooze button and then just say, okay, I can just do that tomorrow. So looking at this list of whys, one is you want to reduce some stress. You're overwhelmed. You have too many balls that you're juggling. You want to reduce stress. So having more control is in fact the way to reduce stress. Matter of fact, for many years, I had a radio show, and on the radio show, I used to bring on a psychologist, and we used to talk about the living through remodeling and the stress that it created. And as a scientist or as a doctor, he usually walked us through stress that you're feeling is a product of overwhelm. And if you can just break it in terms of bite-sized pieces and reduce some of those overwhelm, literally the stress starts to vaporize. Second reason that you want to have more mastery of your time is you want to accomplish more. You know, even if it's only 1 or 2% more, accomplishing more is accomplishing more. And who doesn't want to accomplish, you know, a little bit more in their day or their week, or certainly their month? Another is, which again, not quite so obvious, how much time do you invest in yourself to improve? Well, if you just get a dividend of an extra hour, 2 hours a week, you know, you might be able to invest some of that time, that dividend, back into yourself. Here's another one. I mean, how many of you like to break promises, whether it's with team members, whether it's with personal friends, or whether it's with your family? I would argue a lot of times you break promises, it's not because that you intended to kind of maliciously break a promise, is that you were not in control of your day, and therefore some things fell through the cracks. So if you have more control and more masterful of your time, you won't break promises. Another reason is to think. Now, this is a great time of the year, especially over the holidays, to really reflect on all the things certainly we're grateful for, but also think a little bit more clearly about, as you move into Q1 of 2021, you know, what are some of those things that I want to be doing? Well, the only way that you're going to have time to go deep enough in that thinking and think clearly about it is, in fact, if you have time. And the last why is achieving medium and short-term goals. You know, I think what's been interesting, and certainly 2020, we've been focused on getting through the day, getting through the week. You know, there hasn't been anything about medium and longer term goals. Yes, some of you are very busy, some of you have had very good years, but the reality is it's not because you're looking out at the mountains at the horizon. You're having good years because the phone's ringing off the hook, because the demand is so great. But you know, if you had more time and more control of your day and your week, you could start to pepper in some of those medium and longer term goals. So I think when you look at this in totality, there's a lot of really, really good whys of why you want to make this a priority to become more masterful. But the bottom line is that if you can do this, if you can stick with some of the things I'm going to be talking about today, you're going to feel better. You're going to feel more fulfilled. You know, regardless of what all the additional things that you can accomplish, you know, you're just going to feel better. And if you can accomplish that in itself, I think that's a very worthy goal. So let's talk about one of the foundational elements. If you ever want to have control, you've got to understand proactive and reactive time. Now, proactive time, in terms of simple definition, is the time that you're reacting to others. In other words, others are controlling it, not you. Now, when you have a meeting scheduled, for example, with a boss or with a client, you're still controlling that 1 hour meeting, and that it is a proactive activity, not a reactive. But think about all the other reactiveness that happens. So the real inventory question that you have to ask yourself is, what percentage of your time, and I encourage you to get out a pen and write this down, what percentage of your time is reactive in a typical day versus proactive where you control it? So I want you to take literally just a seconds, just reflect on this. And after you reflect on it, you know, maybe over the course of the next coming days, you know, go back and take some inventory and look at what that is. So what percent of your time is reactive versus proactive? I'll give you a little tip. It's got to add up to 100. So when you think about this, you're going to find, and I've done this exercise literally with thousands of people, that the answers to your question, even doing exactly the same role in your business with different businesses, is very different. But the bottom line is you want to have a higher degree of proactive time, not reactive time. Now, what I've learned both from personal experiences as well as working and coaching so many, you want to be ideally in that 80-85% proactive and 15 to 20% reactive. There's always going to be reactive. We're human beings. There's always going to be things that we don't have full control. And quite frankly, we don't want to always have full control. But if your numbers are 50-50, if your numbers are 60% reactive and 40%, what we want to start to do first is start to shift and look at some of the primary sources of those reactive activities. So the first one is your clients, Now, if you think about it, in home improvement, home remodeling, you have a certain amount of active clients. These could be prospects that are signing a contract. They could be under construction, whatever. You have a certain number of active clients. It's not an infinite number. It's a specific number. So what I want you to do, Monday, right after the holidays, I'll give you a break through the new year. Right after the holiday, Monday, I want you to write down a list of those active clients. And let's just say for kicks, you have 5 to 10 active clients that you're working with very directly. Monday morning, I want you to communicate proactively to them. And of these 10 clients, in communicating, it could be as simple, I hope you had a great holiday, just looking at my schedule coming up, I've got some time available Tuesday or Thursday at 12 o'clock. That might be a good time for us to catch up and address any questions that you might have with your project that have come up over the last few days. Just a simple, sweet, just a proactive type of communication. And obviously it's going to vary depending on who the client is and what you're doing for that client. Now, what you're going to find is a certain percentage of those clients are going to respond back. It's probably going to be 3 or 4 and say, thank you very much. Tuesday at 12 o'clock works just fine. Let's just have a short call then. So 2, maybe 3 or 4 of those folks will do that. Then there's going to be another 3 or 4 that, quite frankly, don't allow you to do anything. They're going to tap you on the shoulder, get you in a reactionary mode regardless. And then there's going to be another 3 or 4 that respond back, say, I think we're good right now, but I'll send you a note if, in fact, I have an issue or question that pops up, and I'll give you plenty of notice so that we can schedule a time. So what you've done is you've taken 2/3 of these folks out there and you've shifted them from traditionally a reactionary mode into a proactive mode. The second group is your team. Now, one kind of false conception that we have is we want to be very helpful to our team. And as a result of that, we get constant interruptions, constant questions, constant issues, constant fires to put out from our team. So what I'm going to encourage you to do moving forward, and I know this is not easy because it's kind of an involuntary habit for many of you, is rather than dropping and responding to those particular questions, issues that prop up from your team, I want you to set a time that you're going to do it. I want, when Mary comes up to you, has a question for you, say, Mary, I'm in the middle of doing something right now. Can we set a time maybe at about 3 o'clock today? Let me circle back to you. Does that work for you? And Mary says yes or no, and maybe you have to schedule another time. So here's what's going to happen. You're going to find that 1/3 of the time, they're going to say, fine, not a problem. 1/3 of the time, they're going to say, no, this needs to be addressed immediately, and it'll only take a few minutes. And then guess what? 1/3 or more of the time, they're going to solve it on their own. That in many ways, you were more of just a crutch in the process, and it literally vaporizes on itself. So as a result of that, you're literally taking about 2/3 of those reactiveness and you're moving them to a proactive kind of side of the equation, and you're going to reduce that. So now already, if you're at 50-50, proactive versus reactive, I've shifted it from 60-40 and now maybe 65-35 just by focusing on these 2 categories. And this takes some practice, but you can move yourself fairly quickly into a proactive mode. The third area of source of reactive activity is your family. Now, you can take the same techniques as with your clients, as with your team members, to approach your family, and I think you'll see the same kind of result. So I say this is a foundational element because it's very hard to ever become masterful of your time if you're a product of all the reactive activities. So one of the very fundamental things is you've got to work on moving a higher percentage, 80, 85% of your time being more proactive. And even if you can't get to that right away, and you're at 60-40 now, try to get it to 65-30 time. Try to take baby steps, and eventually that dial is going to shift over. You're going to see the benefits of it and really take it from there. Now, the next thing I want to touch on is a whole kind of theme of being efficient versus effective. As you know, technology has a double-edged sword to it. The good thing is that it allows us to be more efficient. We can do so much faster in a more, oftentimes more appropriate and quick kind of way. It's more efficient. However, technologies also don't necessarily make it more effective. So you want to move towards, if you want to be more masterful of time, you've got to be focused on effective, not necessarily just efficient. And that's where you, in effectiveness, you're really accomplishing the desired goal or the outcome, but you're doing it in the best way. Think about it in terms of the number of times, for example, you send out a text or an email, as opposed to picking up the phone and making a call. You know, you've got to ask yourself, what is the most effective way to do what I want to do here? And then create a plan to do it that way, not necessarily the most efficient. So let's take some inventory, because I'm a big believer that you've got to get to know yourself a little bit more when it comes to time. And this can be, especially over, you know, the first of the year, can be kind of a fun exercise to do. But you've got to understand when you are best at doing certain things, where you should be doing those things, and then obviously what is the activity itself to do. So let me talk a little bit about the when for a minute here. You know, as I talk to audiences, it's really interesting. I oftentimes ask, are you a morning person or are you an evening person? It's interesting. It's almost always a 50-50 split. And, you know, those that are morning people just kind of assume that most everybody's a morning person and vice versa, but that's not true. It's about a 50-50 split. You are wired a certain way. Now, this may change long-term from growing up as a college person up into a young adult and so on and so on. But for the most part, you are who you are. Now, I share this because you need to take some inventory. And a good way to do this is make a little chart. Now, if you see this little chart, and this is actually a chart of myself, and on the left-hand side of this chart, you see when. And the vertical side of the when starts with early AM, mid-morning, so on, all the way to the late evening. Those are the different kind of intervals of the day. Now, you can have 8 intervals, 10 intervals. I have 7 intervals of time in terms that I wanted to do kind of some analysis. The next thing, and as you can see, I'm kind of a morning person. I know, for example, my creative juices, how I move through certain things, are different in the morning than they are in the afternoon or they are in the evening. Again, this is a personal exercise. We're all a little bit different, but you're usually either a morning person or evening person. Now imagine a world that you can do what you're best in that time of the day, which is one of the things that we all should achieve to. Now, I would argue, you might say, well, I don't really have that option. And I would argue, no, that's not true. You do have the option. It is a choice that you can start to pepper and put certain things in the morning versus the evening and be much more effective at it. So if you look at my case here, my mindset is the second column. You know, early in the morning, it's a very reflective time. Mid-morning is super creative, productive, moving through presentations, doing different kinds of projects. Then I get to like lunchtime, and then I get into the, you know, a little bit more interactive, a little bit more people focused, not necessarily internal focus. Then late in the afternoon, I need to kind of start the wind down. And then once I get into the evening, I need to disconnect and then recharge, relax. Now, then what you do with this is you try to marry the activities that you're either presently doing or you want to do for that time of the day and that right mindset. So again, going back to me, for example, I tend to, in my creative zone, mid-morning, design, think, write, you know, in my productive, put together presentations, certainly like this, work on projects, those kind of things. And then certainly once I get into a lunchtime and beyond, I'm much more interactive, want to have a lot more conference calls and those kind of things. Now, think about this. You need to also think about where you're doing these things, because, you know, one of the things that I find that's interesting is you're more successful if you can find the right context of doing things, not necessarily just the what it is you're doing. So there's certain things that you really do need a quiet place. You know, one of the people I was working with years ago, coaching him on this, you know, he thought, okay, a quiet place is his office. So he closed the door and he's working on, you know, planning his day and all this, and he's getting constant interruptions. So I said, Bill, let's do it differently. Go to another place in the office, another place in your home. It's really quiet so that you can focus on doing that activity there. It's not necessarily just because you have a door. So make sure that you're marrying not only the activity, the right kind of mindset and the right time of the day, but also the right environment to do it. I know for myself, working at home, working remotely like everyone is, yeah, I literally bounce around different spaces within my home depending on what the activities are. So the next little inventory exercise I want you to do is take this time blend. So you think about your time in terms of some different categories, you know, and what you want to do is you want to look at how much time that you're spending in each of those categories presently. And I'm going to give you a sample of this. And then you want to translate what's ideal and then create a plan to start to shift that over. So let me give you a real live example. Now, this one is not me personally, but I was working with a salesperson, Top Gun salesperson in the closet business. And, you know, we took some inventory of his time. And the first thing I said on the activity side is what are some of the different activities in a typical week that you do? And in his case, he had sales appointments. He had a little bit of interactive marketing things because he was responsible for some of his lead gen. You know, he spent some time in a training kind of exercise and project work, and then had internal meetings like everybody has. And then he would go out on site measures and site visits, and then had a bunch of odds and ends administrative tasks that we put into that bucket. So then I said, okay, how many hours per week for the last 4 to 6 weeks are you spending in each one of these? So he was saying, I have typically about a 45-hour week, and he broke it down into the parts, and this is what he came up with. So 10 sales appointments, he on average had 5 new leads a week, et cetera, all the way through. So then I said, time out. I said, okay, in a perfect world, in an ideal setting, how many hours would you like to move this average to really be more effective, to have you accomplish goals, to make more money, to have more time with your family? Whatever the goal was, what would you like to do to adjust the blend? So what we did was, and he worked on this for about 2 or 3 months and was able to move it to this blend. He added a couple of hours a week, 1 more sales appointment a week. So that became 12 on sales appointments. Now, because he was having to generate some of his own leads, he needed to spend a little bit more time on marketing. So as you can see, increased marketing time from 6 to 7. Now, he knew he had to get better to close things. So he needed to get his close rate up and certainly more effectiveness of his sales appointment. So he actually invested a little bit more time into himself and into sales training and actually working with a coach to get better. The project work, he couldn't really avoid in terms of estimating, designing projects, that kind of thing. In internal meetings, he shifted from a lot of his meetings that were an hour down to 45 minutes or an hour down to 30 minutes and he was able to save about an hour a week with some of the internal meetings. And he also grouped his time together and planned it a little bit different with his site visits. So he was able to save some time there. And then as a result, certainly was able to, just literally scrape out, sand down the edges of administrative time. So if you look at the ideal hours, in this case, it's the same amount of hours in a week, but here was some of the outcome. This particular person increased his close rate by about 5 to 10 points. He increased his income about 25% because of a higher close rate and because of certainly better training and more. He also reduced his stress and certainly had the same amount of hours in a week in accomplishing those things. So the point of this exercise is simple. If you can take some inventory of your time and start with 7 categories, sometimes it's a little bit less, maybe certainly not lower than 5 and certainly less than 10, but shoot for 7 categories in terms of how you spend your time, and then I think you can be more effective. So the next exercise I want to talk a little bit about, kind of moving into, managing stress. This is certainly a very stressful time. And this was actually a new technique I developed about 5 or 6 years ago. But what's interesting, I've weaved it into this particular seminar because I think for many people that are experiencing more stress, this is probably one of the more helpful elements of the whole talk. It's what I call the stress clouds. Now, stress clouds, if you think about this in a metaphorical way, on a sunny, sunny day, the sun is streaming down, you're feeling good, you're feeling energized, you have the clarity, you can see the blue sky ahead of you. It's really, really very positive. And then all of a sudden, clouds start to come in. They start to block some of the sun, and to the point that it's 100% cloudy day. Now you're feeling like you're in a little bit of a funk. Well, I like to think in metaphors, try to make things more visual for me. And translating this a step further, what you do as a process, the first thing you do, take a simple sheet of paper and draw a stick figure. And that stick figure is you. That's you in the life, you in the world, you in the sky out there. The next thing I want you to do is I want you to think about stress as a cloud. And I want you to draw different sizes of clouds that represent the amount of weight, those burdensome things that are on your back. Now, most people who do this exercise will have some big clouds and some small clouds. Usually if you're feeling a degree of stress, and I do this exercise for myself every 7 to 10 days, it's just amazing how it really changes how you feel about things, is you draw these, the big ones are the big stresses and the little ones are the little one or the annoyances. Then what you want to do is just put a word in each one. And then under each one is have some actions that would vaporize some of these clouds. Think of it just that way. It's a cloud up there blocking the sun. What would vaporize, make that cloud a little bit smaller? So in this case, just as an example, I had a meeting coming up, a Jones meeting coming up. So what would help to vaporize it? If I wrote out an outline, I put it to paper, I set the expectations for all the people that were going to be part of the meeting, and I would confirm everybody that was supposed to attend was going to attend. That's all I was going to do at that point. Meeting may have been coming up 2 weeks, 3 weeks away. It didn't matter. That's what I was going to do. And with those actions, I say to myself, how much smaller will that cloud get? Because that's really the goal. And you can do this with all the different stresses. Then what you do is when you're doing your daily calendar, whether it's through Outlook or whether it's through the time mastery system, you weave in those things, those action steps that will help you reduce that step, that either that day you add a little bit of that action to it, or you do it in the coming days beyond. And then you work on tackling it and then monitoring it a few days later. So I can assure you that what this does is it really kind of gets that weight, that burden, that stress off your back a little bit, and you're going to feel a little bit better. So the next segment that we're going to go into, which is kind of number 5 on my 7 simple steps, is a system. Now, you know that there's systems in life that we have, whether it's baking cookies, whether it's in exercising, or whatever the planning system. But this is a time mastery system that you can actually get in a lot more detail in my book, certainly is one way to do it. But you reach out to our friends here at Engage or at Leap, and they will make sure that you either have access to the book or certainly if you need some guidance there. So before I get into the details of the system, I want to talk just a little bit about this quote. And there's this wonderful man from many, many years ago, Norman Vincent Peale. Some of you heard of him. And one of the things he said that really, really hit a chord for me was this simple quote. And that is, plan your work for today and every day, then work your plan. Now, every word in this quote is important. He says plan. He didn't say do a to-do list. He said plan. Plan your work. In other words, you're designing what your day needs to be, your work, for today. He didn't say tomorrow. He didn't say for next week. He said today. Every day. Every day. And that means the habit, the success habits that you create by doing it every day. And then and only then you work your plan. You know, see, we have a tendency to create a to-do list and think that's a plan. That's like saying build deck. That's a to-do list. Where's the material list? Where's the sketch? Where's the flow chart in terms of the labor involved? Where's the communication with the client? Those are all planning elements, not just a to-do list. So what we need to do is shift to that thinking of plan your work for today, every day, then work your plan. So that's really the essence of what this system is all about. You know, and as Shashi said at the beginning of this all started many years ago with me actually taking a seminar. And the professor of this seminar is through the University of Maryland. Very, very effective speaker and thinker. However, they didn't spend much time on the day. So I came away out of this seminar feeling frustrated in the early 90s and really needing to create a system on my own. And you're seeing kind of the latest in terms of the evolution of that system. So there really are a series of elements. And I'm going to be walking you through these elements in this process as we move through today. First is a setup, then you have a brain dump, which is a to-do list. Most of you do that. Now just notice how many more steps after the to-do list there are to do. There's all sorts of steps, and I'm going to work you through each one of those steps. So there's 10 steps involved in this mastery process. Now, just like steps when it's you get out of bed and you're brushing your teeth and flossing and doing your necessary hygiene in the morning, you know, you have that same 10-step process. You don't really think about it because it's kind of you're unconsciously competent in all those things, so you're able to focus. The same thing is true with this time mastery system that I'm talking about today. So the first framework is for the first 30 days. If you want to tackle this, number one, I will be for the first 30 days your time mastery coach. You know, you can reach out, send me a text, send me an email. If you have a question about doing this, I'll be glad. For the first 30 days, at no charge, I will be your time mastery coach. So don't hesitate to reach out and I will help you. However, you need to commit to yourself. You know, it's been said, when the student's ready, the teacher arrives. The teacher in this case is his system. And if you're not willing to make a 30-day commitment to this, that's what it's going to take to form some of the habits that will help you. Understand in the first 30 days, the first week is tough. You got to follow these techniques. You know, it's like learning a sport. You may not like the blocking and tackling, and you might be able to throw the ball, catch the ball, but you got to follow the techniques 100%. You got to invest a minimum of 30 minutes a day, but I'm going to give you, after a period of time, an hour a day dividend. So you're going to get back so much extra time. Include the personal and professional activities. Don't be or try not to be obsessed by this. Try to be more disciplined. And I think you're going to be certainly more successful when you do this. Okay, setup. You need a quiet place. Start 60 minutes before the first activity. Use a spiral notebook. You have all your data in front of you. You need to turn your cell phones off. Now you're ready to rock. Now you're ready to plan. And by the way, after about a month or two of doing this, it's like jumping out of the bed, getting your runner's high. That's what it feels like, except it's with your brain, not necessarily just with your body. So imagine a blank sheet of paper. It's a little bit hard on a webinar like this, but again, all this is spelled out in the book in a simpler way. At the top, you have the date. And I usually like to start with some sort of a theme. The first thing you do is what I call the brain dump. Now, the brain dump is kind of like your to-do list. And on this piece of paper, imagine this 8.5 by 11 piece of paper or spiral notebook, you're doing the brain dump of that day, only that day, not that week, that day. And you want to list, again, all the personal, all the professional activities. Then you get down to the point where there's no more that's coming out. You know, that's why I call it the brain dump. You've dumped it out of your brain and now there's nothing left. The next thing you want is to put reactive time. Now, what I would recommend is 120 minutes of reactive time for everybody. And then you're going to take a time out and you're going to go and get a cup of coffee or a glass of water. And you're going to think, what else would I like to try to accomplish today? And when you just give yourself that time out, that moment, you will think of another couple of things. The next thing you want to do is attach time. Time is the number of minutes to each one of those. Now, it's really simple. If you're not sure, just guess. That's something you'll get better and better at and be able to estimate the amount of time that each thing takes. Then you're going to add that up. When you add it up, it adds up to a certain amount of hours in a day. Now, in this particular example, this created a window of about 11 hours, a little over 11 hours. The next thing you want to do is take a look at your day timer, your Outlook, take a look at your calendar, and then make a little timeline. So on the right side, a simple vertical line, and then a series of points on that line that represents different milestones. They could be meetings, they could be conference calls, Zoom calls, they could be a lunch meeting, whatever it happens to be, that you have those milestones. And then you want to set the time that some of those milestones begin and end. So in this case, I was going to launch my day at 7. I was doing my planning at 6:30, launching my day at 7, and I wanted to be done at 6. So that was about 11 hours. So I knew that this brain dump resulted in the same amount of time that my timeline allowed for. Now I want to hook those together. I want to put the time slots into the times that are available to do it. So you simply, by adding these letters of blocks of time and integrating them into the timeline. The next thing you want to do is do an analysis. Now, this analysis is just simply, okay, with the A time slot of 7 to 8:30, that's 90 minutes. If I add up all my A's, can I squeeze them into 90 minutes? And when I do that, all the A's add up to 80 minutes. That's fine. 8:30 to 10 is 90 minutes. 90 minutes goes into 90 minutes. That's fine, and so on and so on. The next thing that you want to do is you are ready to launch now. You've got a day that has a to-do list that will make you feel better and fulfilled. You've got a timeline of when you're going to accomplish it. All you need to think about is the A's. Focus on the A's and just move through the A's. Don't even think about what you're doing that afternoon, and you can plow through it. And then throughout the day, you're going to monitor it. About every 60 to 90 minutes, you're going to say, okay, just like a pilot, what do I need to do to correct my course? And you will need to correct your course because some of the things you've estimated for, some of the reactiveness that comes into your day, you don't need to, so you've got to start to make adjustments and move things around. So some common mistakes. I'm going to go back just a minute. So everybody can imagine, this is one sheet of paper, 8.5 by 11. I encourage you use spiral notebooks. That's the way to do this. And as you can see, I do it all the time, every day myself. But here's some common mistakes that I see that are out there that I want to touch on. One is forcing 14 hours into a 10-hour day. You know, you're not going to be able to do that. So therefore, you've got to keep working your plan. Think of it like a piece of clay. You're continuing to work it until it matches the time available to the activities. Second is your activities are too general, like build deck, too general. You got to be specific. Third is you're not putting enough time in the plan. You need a minimum of 30 minutes. What's interesting, the most successful people at doing this, they actually spend more time. I spend 45 minutes a day. I know people that spend up to 60 minutes a day planning their day, then working their plan. But what's interesting is they're accomplishing so much more than everyone else. Not being in a quiet place. You cannot do this at the breakfast table. Getting creative in the process. You got to follow my techniques. Not monitoring and then giving up too soon on the plan. Because, you know, this activity takes a good solid 30 days to master this. So, a few frequently asked questions. One is, should I do this over the weekend? Very common question with almost every audience I get. And my answer is, not necessarily. That's up to you, but I like to surrender and kind of give up my weekend to my family, but that's up to you. You can do it over the weekend, but I would say, no, you don't have to. Can I use another type of notebook? No, the answer is no. You got to use a spiral notebook. It's got to be 8.5 by 11. And those that are leveraging and using Outlook, it is a little bit of an redundant process, but I have Outlook calendars going as well. So it's redundant, but not necessarily inefficient. When should I return the emails and calls? That depends. If you're the kind of person that gets, let's say 100, 200, 3 of those 100 a day, you might need to carve out 2 or 3 time slots for 15 minutes a day to just focus on addressing some of the emails. Can I do the planning the night before? No, something mysteriously happens overnight that you need to do this in the morning. What if my brain dump doesn't add up to the time allowed? Then that's certainly a nice problem to have, but you need to, I think, integrate more medium, longer term activities into your brain dump so that it's very close to being the same. And by the way, they could be personal activities too. You want to go out for a long walk, you want to go on a bike ride in the middle of the day, those kind of things can be incorporated in. Can I make changes to the plan during the day? Absolutely. You're going to be making changes. So that's important. What happens if my day crashes and burns? Generally, if you have that happen, like your child is sick and get a call from the school or whatever that happens, you know, you need to just accept it's crashing and burning. And what do I need to do to regroup? And there's nothing wrong with making a 5-hour day rather than an 8 or 10-hour day as well. So if you can accomplish these things, here's just some results you'll see. If you can just figure out a way to get an extra 10 minutes a day, and that's kind of a no-brainer, you will end up with more than 60 hours in a year. If you can get 183 hours in a year, and if you can get 1 hour in a day, and this system will absolutely give you 1 hour in a day for those that are experiencing any degree of pain, you will get a dividend of 365 days in a year. So the real question is, you know, ask yourself, especially over the holidays, if I had an extra 100 hours, if I got a gift of an extra 100 hours in a year, what would I do? How would I make myself better? How could I make more money? What would I do with that extra? What about 200 hours? What about 300 hours? So I'm not giving you a pie in the sky, because I know people that kind of adopt these things can in fact get an extra hour a day over and above the planning, an extra hour a day of dividend, and look what those results would be. You know, you start to divide that in terms of work weeks and what have you. You know, you're talking about literally getting 6-7 work weeks of time back that you could devote into other things. So you need to make time more concrete and meaningful. So a couple of key takeaways, and then I'll wrap up. And if you do have a question or two, I do have time for that. One is mastering time is a choice. You know, if you fail to plan to fail. This is a planning system, not a to-do system. Takes 30 days. Be proactive. You've got to really address the proactive element first if you want to be successful. And then monitor, and the numbers don't lie. The numbers don't lie, and that's going to create some real motivation. And certainly last but not least, you know, success for many is not necessarily who and what you are, it's in what you do. And I think if you can see it as a verb and not a noun, I think you're going to be more successful. So I love this little quote heard many years ago: intention without actions equals squat. So that's really my challenge, especially as we move towards the new year. Don't just have intentions. Make sure you have actions that are really adapted to it. And I want to thank everybody that's listening today, and certainly special thanks to Engage and certainly Market Sharp, as well as our host, the Leap, my friends at Leap. So turn it back over to you.
Thank you very much, Mark. This is really great. If there is one thing that I can take away from this is I hope everybody in this holiday season is feeling much better about themselves. That's definitely something that that I wanted to thank you for doing this. And as we said, there have been a lot of changes in people who have adopted your system. I think that's really great for all of us. We actually have a surprise for everybody on this webinar. We will give away a copy of Mark's book. Just write to marketing@leap2digital.com and with your mailing address, or if you would prefer a Kindle version. And all we ask for in return is a few minutes of your time with a call on us. And also, we wanted to see if you'd like an opportunity to talk to us, to our partners, Market Sharp, and to Engage, because all of us work together in a lot of ways. So please, in the poll that is coming up, I hope you will take the opportunity to talk to any one of these companies. And also just hang on for a little bit while, for a few more minutes. We have some question and answers that we will go through, and also announce the winner of the AirPods. So I'm going to wait for a couple of minutes for that. In the meantime, let's look at some questions. Please post your questions on this. In general, Mark, I want to start off with one question for you, because a lot of people will say, like, what is the difference? Why not use a app or something else to do this time saving? I know the answer to this because I've been following your system, but just thought I would ask you that same question.
Well, I think the reality is that it's like remodeling or home improvement businesses. There's so many different processes that you have in doing business. And I think in this case, the roots of this is making it really visual, making it easy. And what I encourage, at least for the first couple of months, is do it in the system I'm giving you. Make it really, really visual. Make it something that's kind of tactile for you to see. And if you can do that for at least 30 to 60 days, I think you'll get hooked on it, and therefore you'll realize that, writing and drawing lines and diagramming is actually, an enjoyable thing, and everything shouldn't be done through technologies. However, after a couple of months, if you want to adapt it to a different system, you will have the methodology ingrained within you, so you can certainly be able to do that. But I'm just a big believer that, even though I use my have a completely packed Outlook calendar just like you, I have utilized different technology tools. This is really a great way that you can kind of do it anywhere, whether it's on a park bench or whether it's sitting in a quiet spot in your home to be able to do. There's no electricity required, so to speak, other than just you and a spiral notebook and a pen.
Cool. No, thank you very much. And as we announce the winner of the contest, is congratulations to Harold Boshada. I hope I pronounce your name well, just like people find it difficult to pronounce my name. But Harold, congratulations. Thank you very much for being here. And everybody who comes to a LEAP is a winner as well. So you have the chance to talk to any of these companies, LEAP included. Plus, if you send us an email, marketing@leap2digital.com, we'll be more than happy to send a copy of Mark's book. Also, I did mention that if you get on a demo with us and talk to our people about how LEAP can help your business, we'll also send you lunch. And I'm going to look forward to some of your questions. So do we have any questions? I know that was a lot of information that came through. And I think one of the questions is, what is the email for Mark's book? You can write to marketing@leap2digital. That's right on the screen, Adam. Thank you very much. Mark, I do think, having attended your sessions both online and offline, and obviously in 2020 we couldn't do anything offline, but you do make people do some of these exercises, especially with the stress clouds, right? I think hopefully in 2021 we'll have the opportunity for many of the people on this webinar also to meet offline. But in the meantime, if there are no more questions, I want to wish you, Mark, happy holidays. I want to wish everybody who attended this webinar happy holidays, and let's all look for a very progressive and a wonderful 2021. Thank you very much, everyone.
Thank you, Sashi. Thank you, friends. Good luck and Happy New Year, everyone.